why is there a heightened risk of cardiovascular disease in people with diabesity, insulin resistance, and metabolic syndrome? What what
Mm.
what make that shift for people who have all those symptoms to more susceptible to cardiovascular
Yeah.
disease?
Yeah, so there are lots of factors with this. And one of my mantras, because I have many of them, is control your insulin, control your life. And I have a t-shirt that says control your insulin, control your life. And I'll wander around and people will wonder why I'm wearing a shirt that says this. And then we get to talk about metabolic health and the importance of not being insulin resistant. So anyway, so to put it, there are many avenues we could go on, and this is chapter 1 of my book, but really the most simplistic and straightforward as it relates to the lipid neighborhood is insulin is a storage hormone. And so when you eat, insulin should rise because its job is to put the clothes in the suitcases, so to speak, or put the mail in the mailboxes, if you want to use the mail metaphor. And as long as your mailbox isn't full, as long as your suitcases aren't full, then you're able to put the mail or the clothes in, and then you can go on your merry way. And so really you're storing it for later in the adipocyte, or you're using it as fuel in oxidative tissues. And that's how it's supposed to be. However, if you are in a chronic state of overnutrition, well, and you continue to eat, well, what happens? Well, the mailmen are trying to deliver the mail and the mailboxes are full. Well, those mailmen, remember, they are on lipoproteins and they're driving their trucks around and they aren't delivering the mail. Well, what do they have to do? Well, they're more likely to get in a traffic jam and potentially get into a wreck in your arterial wall. And that's no good. That's a bad mailman. And potentially we need to even address the corrupt workforce at that point. Additionally, when you are, you basically insulin's still going to rise, even if your mailboxes are full, even if your suitcases are full, well, insulin's going to try to recruit stronger insulin friends to jam the mail in the mailbox or jam the clothes in the suitcase. But when insulin continues to rise, eventually, you're just asking for burnout. And then the amount of insulin that is required to normalize your blood sugars eventually at some point fails as well. And hyperinsulinemia itself, if your insulin is high, and even if your blood sugar is normal, that's associated with a 50% increase in all-cause mortality. But then when your blood sugars and insulin are high at the same time, 232% increase in all-cause mortality. And so you're just asking for trouble at that point. And most of the people that I saw with type 2 diabetes, they still were making insulin. And even when you would check a C-peptide on them, and you can check a fasting insulin in anybody who's not on insulin as well, then it's a lot of times it's really high. And so I encourage people to check a fasting insulin in addition to their basic metabolic panel, because you can have people with a hemoglobin A1C of 4.8, which is the average blood sugar for the last 3 months. You can have people with a fasting glucose of 78, but their fasting insulin's like 30. Oh, wow, that person's making way too much insulin in order to keep their blood sugars normal. And so that is a surefire sign of early insulin resistance. And so at some point it's going to fail, blood sugars are going to trend up, and then we're in all sorts of trouble. And so just like we're trying to prevent cardiovascular disease with things like the coronary artery calcium score by checking things in addition to our basic lipid panel, like LPL-A, like ApoB, because ApoB is a particle metric and particles dictate risk. It's not the mass of cholesterol that matters. It's the amount of particles, potential perpetrators in your lipid neighborhood that really dictates your lipid mediated risk. And so by identifying some of these things from the lipid neighborhood standpoint, preventatively, we also want to take the same approach to metabolic health. And a fasting insulin is a really good way to identify insulin levels trending upward before blood sugars start to become abnormal. And that's a huge thing, because if you are not insulin resistant, well, things tend to go right. The mailmen tend to deliver the mail how they're supposed to. And so it's a very important thing. Obviously, there are other factors that are important as well in this whole framework. But if I could pick one thing not to be, it would not be insulin resistant. So I've chosen not to be. And so that's a wonderful thing. And it's a very modifiable thing from a lifestyle perspective. And in general, sometimes people, before they hear me actually discuss all these things, they ask me, so how do I not be insulin resistant. And I'm like, well, here you go. It's sleep, move, don't eat crap, and then, you know, do that every day the rest of your life. And I'm like, dang it, that's not the answer I wanted. And so, but that's really it. And now of course, that's, you know, easy for me to say since I've been doing this every day of my life since I was, you know, had a blonde bowl cut in first grade. But the thing is, are there tools that can help people catalyze that shift, you know, to a lifestyle that is sleeping, moving, and not eating junk? Yes. And so do we have tools? We have some amazing, even medical catalysts these days that can help shift that for people. Because, you know, the person who is 120 pounds overweight and has raging type 2 diabetes, they come to me and I say, hey, you know, just move more, just eat better food. I mean, that's not helpful, is it? And so, however, if I come alongside them and I say, hey, here's where we're at, or maybe we're in a little bit of a rough spot, but I got your back here. And I have some tools that I know can reduce your risk of cardiovascular events, but can also help catalyze a shift to a sustainable lifestyle for you so that you can get your life back and you can add some life to your years. And that then I'm going to use those tools to help you. And it's really, really cool when you have somebody who comes to you. And I remember one patient who was on 320 units of insulin. He was a type 2 diabetic on 320 units of insulin a day. And his hemoglobin A1C was still like 9.8 or something like that. So it was not working anyway. And he still made insulin. And I checked a C-peptide on him. He still made a lot of insulin. And so giving more insulin to an already insulin resistant person who still makes it is silly, right? And so I was like, hey, man, let's do this thing. And so I gave him a specific dietary approach. I gave him a medical catalyst that helped him. And then he was able to get off all his insulin. He was able to lose 70 pounds. He was getting back to riding his bike with his wife. And, he felt like he was a better husband, a better father, a better friend, and all the things. And so that's wonderful. And so, those are the sort of things that we are able to do and the things that we can do as clinicians. And it's really rewarding, just to be able to help people with their lives. And so anyway, I just think that, control your insulin, control your life is obviously going to be one of my mantras for everybody. And the closer you can have the mitochondria of a pro athlete, the better across the lifespan when it comes to cardiovascular health, when it comes to mitigating neurodegenerative disease. And hopefully for as long as you're around, you can just be having some fun and go crush it at life.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you